Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this lecture and refresher course at the Ramanujan College. And I'm also thankful to the organizing team for inviting me. The topic of my talk today is feminist ethics and its implications for social relationship. Now, this actually I thought perhaps, the importance of social relationship is extremely vital issue in feminist ethics. So what I'm going to do in this lecture basically is what feminist ethics is and what is its concern, what is the critique of the general ethics, normative ethical theories and liberalism, and how it departs from the traditional ethics and how most of the thinkers saw women traditionally, and how it departs from all those traditional way of looking at women as a subject, as a self. Now, these are some of the issues which I'm going to talk in this lecture. And I will focus on the basic social relationship. That is the crux of the whole issue, which we perhaps need to look into. That's exactly what I'm trying to emphasize. So let me start with the first question. That is, what exactly is the concern of feminist ethics? Now, feminism, some of you must be aware, takes reflective side of the movements. When it takes reflective side of the movements, takes shape of understanding social reality of gender relations and tries to get rid of the patriarchal or male-dominated culture. So it is actually criticizing the patriarchal structure of the society where male dominates. When feminists regard ending of sexual oppression and injustices as a moral imperative, so for feminists, it is a moral imperative to reduce the oppression and injustice which women face in their life experience, and also not only at the reflective side or level, but also on in their practices in their life itself. So this is the practice which is called as feminist ethics. And it has a different logic from, say, biomedical ethics. Now, very often people say that feminist ethics is a part of applied ethics. And if it is applied ethics, then can it be similar to that of biomedical ethics or environmental ethics or legal ethics, etc., etc.? Now, I'm of the view that feminist ethics is very different from all these applied aspects. Why? Because feminist ethics or feminist gender side can be seen even in biomedical ethics and in any other kind of applied ethics, legal, political, liberal, which we are talking about. So therefore, feminist ethics is much wider. It can be applicable to any applied ethics. It presupposes that we understand ourselves well enough as a human being. The main point is, are women human? Or is human only male? Because we have been talking about that ethics deals with human conditions and well-being of human beings. Now, well-being of whom? And mostly the ethical theories have been talking about human as male, and female has always been bracketed, I would say. So women have always been in a disadvantageous situation, and they have not been treated as human beings. And most of the ethical theories, they talk about male human beings. And this assumption is questioned by feminist ethics. It will be clear as I proceed. So ethics actually whether it is medical ethics or biomedical ethics or environmental ethics or legal ethics, it actually deals with the issues which are in that particular area. But feminist ethics transforms ethics, because in every ethics we can find these kind of male treating only as male human beings, and women are not treated as human beings. So it is about any kind of ethics. So feminist ethics can be of any kind of ethics. For feminists, the experiences of normal female is the most important reality. So normal female experience. Now notice the word normal female experience. Now female experience is the crux of the whole thing. So feminism, in short, must construct an ethics which no longer relies on the concealment of power relationships. So the power relationship between two genders, male and female, that has always been concealed, because when we are talking about ethics, we are talking only of male as a human being, and female has always been left out. We'll talk about that a little later. So it is the concealment of the power relationships which actually we are questioning in feminist ethics. There's no concealment of power relationship in feminist ethics. And this works actively to expose them. Now, most of the traditional ethics, feminist ethics questions and exposes them. But the question is that, are feminist ethics, or is feminist ethics unitary? I mean, is there any theory which can be called as feminist ethics? Just as utilitarian ethics or the traditional normative ethical theories like utilitarian ethics, which is given by John Stuart Mill, or the deontological theory, which is given by Immanuel Kant, or virtue theory, which has been emphasized by Aristotle and Philip of Foot and many others. So is there any theory which can be called as feminist theory? The answer is no. Why? Because there's no unitary view of ethics that can be identified as feminist ethics. I'll deal with this in detail in my talk. So there's no unitary ethics, but there are diverge kind of shared project, which can be seen as a feminist ethics. But they're united by the shared project. They diverge widely in their views as to how this project is to be accomplished. Project of feminist ethics, how this can be developed. All feminists agree, not all feminists agree, that there are distinctive features, feminist virtues. Now the question is that if you are talking about female experiences, if you are talking about women's experience, is there any unique experience of female that can be identified? And is there anything which is actually the basic core on the basis of which we can develop feminist ethics? The question, the answer is again no, because there are distinctive feminist virtues and values, and some of them have been even skeptical regarding the traditional positive virtues such as willingness to nurture. I mean, nurturing is, of course, one of the prime virtue of women, which is traditionally has been accepted. And those who are familiar with ecofeminism, they know how this notion of nurturing has been adopted by the feminists and how they have been developing. And affinity with caring and nurturing, these are definitely female virtues. And but then the question is, are these distinctive to only women? That's the question we face. Not all feminists are agreeing on this point. They are distinctive only to women, because nurturing and caring is also available in male gender. So on the basis of this nurturing and caring and many other different virtues which we can find in feminism. Feminists attempt to transform ethics into feminist ethics. So the traditional ethics is being transformed. So the transformation is extremely important. And that is the main point of feminist ethics. So one need to transform the traditional ethics to get the feminist ethics. Feminism rejects. Now, what exactly are the basic concerns of feminism, which actually are followed in feminist ethics? Now, I'll talk a little bit about these issues. There is a priori premise of male superiority. It argues that if women perceives the normative structures of ethical theory as inadequately grounded in their own experiences, then the fault lies with the theory and not with the women. There is distinctive women's social experience. So if not all women see this as a distinctive virtue, some people, so then, the theory which is developed on this distinctiveness, that has to be looked into, not the social experience of the women. The social experience of the women, if they are different, then the difference will come also in their theories or whatever proposed feminist ethics are there. So the social experience of a woman is the worthy of exploration. We must know what is the experience. We must actually develop whatever theoretical outline we are putting for feministic, that has to be based on the women's social experiences. For example, issues like sexuality and bodily self. A woman has a body, and because of the sex, she has a different body, and male has a different body. So this bodily self, a self is rooted in the body, but the self is different from the body. So moral connectedness, and this connectedness, the body and the self connectedness, then how does this connectedness take place? Then we talk about the care, trust, friendship, mothering, nurturing, emotions, psychological fluidity, and finitude. Feminist thinkers about ethics have discussed all this within the boundaries of social cultural reality. So all these issues actually, which we are talking about, these are all related with female experience, women's experience, and women's experience in a particular social cultural reality. So the notion of friendship presupposes with whom you are going to be friendly. Mothering, for example, the relationship between mother and child, the trust. Unless we have a trust in the family, the child cannot develop normally. The concept of care, if the mother doesn't care for the child and the child doesn't care for the parents, then the society will be very different. So all these, and of course it is based on emotions. Mothering needs actually the notion of emotion, and the psychological fluidity, which is like in the sense that the outbursts of the emotions, for example, when somebody is in pain, and when somebody is happy, then expression of this pleasure. So these are all part of feminism, and feminist thinkers actually about ethics must take all these within the boundaries of social cultural reality. Thus, there is a kind of delicate balancing on the one hand of the social reality of femininity, which is a part of our social being. So female is not a female, because I'll come to that a little later, but I will just point out that the notion of female or the male, actually these are social constructs, and some of you might be quite familiar with this. And the women and men also have this biological aspect, which is called the sex. So they emphasize, the whole theory is developed on this distinction between sex and gender. Gender is a social construction. Women becomes women because she has been brought up like a woman. A girl child is brought up like a girl. A boy is a boy because he is brought up with the social construction, with the society, the social norms. He is actually to behave like a boy, right? So a girl must behave like a girl and a boy must behave like a boy. Now, this concept actually is basically rooted in the society. So it is the socio-cultural reality. Thus, there's a kind of delicate balancing. And therefore, I mean, of course, women have this, as we have talked about, the kind of virtues or differences or the attitudes towards bodily self, moral conductedness, care, trust, friendship, mothering, etc., and nurturing. Now, these are all emotional part. Now, these emotional part are equally important for developing any kind of moral view of the women. And these are also part of one's own social being. What I am with these all emotions, not only with reason, but also with emotions. So this kind of, I mean, to be devoid of all this, a woman actually will not be a woman. Therefore, these are some of the feminist characteristics which may be regarded as effects of oppression. And because they have this female feminine characteristics, therefore, the woman is actually not accepted as a human being. She's not accepted as a person, theoretically, and also in our culture. Now, the question is, we have been saying that, we must look at the normal female experiences within a society, within one's own experience. Now, what is the question of normal female experience? Now, that's exactly one has to ask, and one has to look for the answer. The central is the contrasting relation of man and women to the fact of embodiment, because the body is different, female body is different, male body is different. Therefore, they are not only different, one is of an inferior quality and the other is of a superior quality. We all know from our own experiences what is meant by superior quality and what is meant by inferior quality. So women cannot fully be, and therefore women are inferior, man is superior. And moral autonomy cannot be given to women. And this strikes to most of us as self-evidently absurd. And especially women, when they think about themselves, then naturally no women will accept that we are inferior. Women are obviously as capable as men of taking up the subjective viewpoint. And some of us who have actually developed some kind of sense of respect and some kinds of sense of freedom, we know that women are as capable. And now things have changed not only in the whole world, but also within India. We can see that women are really breaking the glasses, and they are moving forward. I mean, we can find women in every field now, not only in science, but also in an army and as pilots and whatnot. We of course had our women prime minister long back, as early as possible within the country, within the world. So women are obviously as capable as men of taking up a subjective viewpoint, of making moral judgments, or exercising will and controlling desire. So women can easily take all sorts of moral stand. The adult women must all be competent to making life and death decisions, about the conception, when to conceive a child or not to conceive a child, whether you want to give the birth to a child or you want to abort it. Now, all these decisions, women are not only possible to take decisions within the social realm, but also within her own life. So there is a massive contrast between male and female subjectivity. Because even now we see that women actually are, they think twice, whether they should take a decision or not. I mean, there are a lot of problems because of the social constraints they have to face in their life. So the question of male subjectivity and female subjectivity in respect to the empirical conditions under which male and female are constructed, they both are very important. Male subjectivity enjoys the support of social institutions. So a male, right from the childhood, gets all sorts of supports. and which generates a sense of selfhood and personal importance, and which do so in part of the at least by positioning women as an excluded other, whereas the women actually do not get the support from the society. Not only, I mean, forget about the society, but not from their own parents, not from the who are the closest to them. So this is the situation while the sense of selfhood is developed, and therefore men, if the man is, if there's no boy in a family, then it is considered as men's absence from women's grouping trends. But if women is absent, it is not considered as an absence at all, because the women are, whether there's no girl in the house does not really make much difference in the house. It is not considered as absence. So one can see that the male selfhood is kind of the ideal, but then at the same time, if we go into the reality, this gender construction is also creates problem for men, because men too have to bow to the contingencies. For example, if a man loses his mother or the closest, or the daughter or the son, I mean, they're not supposed to cry. They cannot show their emotions. I mean, they often have to listen to such kind of comments that, oh, he was crying like a girl, he was crying like women. So even men have to bow down to this kind of social contingencies. So there is a kind of descriptive inadequacy in dominant models. Now these are the dominant models in relation to men, and this is the point actually which feminists are trying to insist, and they're trying to make. Now, within the dominant models, like utilitarian Kantian theory and virtue theory, moral and political theories have misunderstood not only women's difference from men, but also men's difference from women. So you can see that the difference is from both the sides. I mean, the difference between men and women and men, both have to be understood properly. The thought that men too are embodied and vulnerable, they also have a body, they also have emotions, they simply do not have reason, but they also have emotion. So the emotional and sexual life of them is source of insecurity. So if a man behaves like a woman, then also he has to face a lot of social insecurity, and they are caught up as women are. So men also gets caught up with this social construction, which actually is the social structure, and they do not know how to alter. So it's not simply a problem for women, but also it is for men. So as we are trying to say that sex is a biological category and gender is a construction. So it's a problem for male and female both. The gender construction, which is actually construction to this cultural and social setting, it's a problem for both. And feminist theory is different from, and feminist theory is trying to bring this issue at the front. Now the question is that the liberal theories, which are based on Kantian model, basically they are talking about justice, equality, justice, and dignity of human beings. They exclude women from the category of human, as we have already said. And actually, we can look at how these. Before we go to this, maybe we can look at how some of the well-known thinkers have looked at women as a category. So Plato, for example, talks about women as physically weaker than men. So he really doesn't actually give equal status to women. Aristotle talks about women as that women were created to serve in the domestic sphere. I'm very briefly covering this, just to give you an idea that how women have been subjugated. Women actually have been, they are actually created to serve the domestic sphere. Then you have Mill later on, who talks about subjection of women. When he talks of legal and social equality between men and women, but then I mean, he only talks about the theoretically. He's talking about social equality, and Kant calls women as morally deficient. So, as we were saying, that they are not granted. Women are not granted moral personhood or morally they are not granted as human. So you can see that Kant also calls women as a morally deficient. They may have many sympathetic sensations. We were talking about emotions and care, etc. So he grants that they might have sympathetic sensations like good-heartedness and compassion, especially in his article, which is written Observations. And he does not count women as a member of the category of all rational beings as such. So Kant actually defines all human beings. Human beings are rational, and morality actually he develops within the rational conditions. So it's morality is a kind of precondition for being human, and morality is only for the rational beings. And if women are not rational beings, then they are not given any kind of moral status. So thus Kant's universal theory, I mean, normally he claims his theory as being rational and universal theory, but as you can see that it this theory only applies to male human beings and not to female or women. Therefore, Kant's universal theory is not universal. Kant excludes women from the class of persons, classifying them as natural serfs. He classifies them as natural serfs, like Dasi, and very similar to Manu, that they are or even animals. So Kant's view on women is very similar to Manu, which most of us are familiar. So women are not really human beings. Now this is what Kant is actually talking about, and he, especially in his early works. Now he has changed his position a little bit later on, but these are, I mean, whatever we have said about Kant is true about all his early pre-critical work. The another very influential thinker of liberal theory, Rousseau, claims that women their true role is only as a mother, wife, and housekeeper. So their true role is defined as mother, being a mother, or wife, or a housekeeper. But later on, things related to women have changed during the Enlightenment period, around, say, late 17th century onwards, when John Locke's book Essay Concerning Human Understanding was published in 1689. And also one lady, her name is Mary Wollstonecraft, during 1759 to 1797. She lived for a very short period, but she had made a long history, and she has made historical contributions to feminism. These are actually the very briefly the outlook on women from most of these patriarchal normative theories. So as we can see that the notion of equality, justice, and dignity, they are actually the liberal theories are based on Kant, Rawls' theory, for example, and Nozick, John Rawls and Robert Nozick's theories, which are called liberalist theories. And Rawls talks about original position, and which is also a kind of male philosophical corpus. Therefore, as you can see that these are all based on male as human being and not including female. And here in liberal theories also the rights, justice, duty, virtue, pleasure, guilt, shame, etc. They are all defined in terms of male, but not the female. And female is actually granted as otherness. It's becomes very important in feminist ethics because female is not included. Therefore, she's another. She's other. And the question of other is other also a human being? That becomes a very important question. So questioning the notion of equality, who is equal and who is not? Anybody who's not included in the equality is the other. So, I mean, the masculine values are taken as successful, men as a role model, and refusal to be treated as second sex. There's dissatisfaction in the modern society over the formal equality between men and women. They have challenged the idea of equality, which prevails in liberal theory as well as in feminism. So women have a different voice, and this needs to be included in the feminist ethics, and that's the kind of emphasis which feminist people are making. Now, the difference. So, what exactly they are talking about? The feminists are talking about. They are talking about a difference of affirmation. A different voice is needed. A kind of concept of otherness has to be redefined. All these liberal concepts which actually are used in liberal theories, they need to be redefined and they need to be transformed. So it's a different affirmation which will lead to many problems. The main risk remains that we will, and that if it is different, then if we need to talk about the nurturing, mothering, and all these concepts, then it's quite possible that the whole issue, which was to rebuild the whole social structure, so that, and also moral theory, so that the female experiences have to be included. Now, if the female experiences are based on nurturing and emotions, then the traditional role will come back. So there is always a danger that that we might be back to the same, the universal femininity, the female experience. So is there any kind of universal femininity which can be accepted? Now, if we accept that, then that would generate solidarity between women. On the one hand, it will generate, but then the gender difference is central to our social experience. And many systems of difference around which the experience is organized. So the most hopeful outcome of these difficult debates, which the appreciation of otherness extends beyond the phenomenon of gender and a more generous conception of the idea of unity difference. So on the one hand, we are talking about women's normal social experiences. So this is the unity. But on the other hand, we are also talking about women's experience. So each woman is different. And since each different, a black woman is different, a Brahmin woman is different, a scheduled caste woman is different. So therefore, each experience counts the most. Therefore, the unity on the one hand and the difference on the other hand. So the women's experience is in the social context is the key concept, and that has to be seen as unity in difference. It is it has unity in the sense that it is women's experience in the social context, in the as a relational self. But on the other hand, it is a difference because every woman will have her own experience, and therefore there will always be my experience as a mother will always be different from my daughter's experience as a child. So women's experience actually is also differs fundamentally from each other. So we would be, it will be, but then from the moral point of view, both the experiences and all the experiences are extremely important. And therefore, we cannot really have any kind of contractual relationship as as in the liberal theory, Rawls has suggested. So the contractual relationship between the state and the citizens, we don't have any kind of such contractual relation between the parent and the child. A future directed effort, that is not an investment. So when a parent is actually nurturing a child, it is not a contract back as an investment. So the important thing in this implementing all this is that these are not women issues. And when we are talking about all this, these are not really women's issues. If this implies a contrast with universal human issues. So if you think that human issues are different than women issues, now that's not true. Why? Because these are human issues. So women issues are also human issues. From their gender, moral perspective, succeed in finding out universal principles as within a human frame. So when feminist ethics is talked about, it is not about women ethics only, but it is about human ethics. So it is actually looking for some kind of unitary model. It's not looking only for the feminist perspective. Now, the next point which I want to emphasize is regarding the real target, which is the social relation of the gender. Feminists actually are not talking about the hierarchy or the power relationship we have talked about. So the power relationship, surely, I mean, parents have a higher status than the child. But at the same time, this hierarchical relationship, which is a social relationship within the family, so some kind of power will definitely be there. Some kind of hierarchy will always be there. In any relationship, this will be there. But this hierarchical relationship is not of a authority. All right. So the very existence of social system, which makes male and female individuals are assigned from birth to distinct classes, whose identity is determined by the relation to one another. The moment we are born, I mean, we are born in a society, and the relationship is also determined by the status. For example, the elder brother, the younger sister, the younger, the cousin brother, and so on and so forth. So this is a kind of relationship within the social setup, and it identifies a person in that sense with the relationship. Now, in that case, of course, there will be some kind of dominance, but in the dominance of in case of men and the subordination of in case of women, that is something which we are trying to address. Now, this hierarchical relation cuts to the depth of our social being. Now, hierarchy based on the gender, that someone is a man and someone is a woman, that is something which actually we are which we are questioning. It is just not a matter of time when the women's formal equality as citizens is achieved. So, I mean, this formal equality is not something which we are really looking as an achievement, right? We rather argue that gender difference, which it exists at all, must remain as object of suspicion. So the gender difference which is there, that it has to be seen with the suspicion that it ceases to exist, and until this happens, feminism cannot become redundant. So when the gender hierarchy is made less, then only it will the feminism will be successful. So feminism actually is talking about subjectivity of specificity of experiences. As we have said, that women have their own experience, their own social setting, and that has to be looked into by women themselves, not by somebody else. All right. So subjectivity of specificity of experiences is equally important. It is not possible that these experiences are conflicting. It's quite possible that women find conflicting experiences. For example, she might have experience of a child who is rowdy, who doesn't care, but then she does care. So, I mean, this kind of conflict, because should she care for the child who is rowdy, who doesn't listen, who doesn't follow what she says, and who doesn't respect her? Now, on the one hand, she has to care because he is her child. On the other hand, he's a male, and he has learned to disrespect his mother. And such situations, her experiences might be conflicting. But in this kind of situations, she must sort of sort out her own relationship and establish her bond with him. So the question is that, to coming back to the historical history of ethics, which has not been gender neutral, which has been based only recognizing as male as a human being and leaving out female as human being. Now, what kind of feminist ethics we are talking about? How do we develop that? What are the issues whether feminist rethinking is transforming moral concepts and theories? Now, as we were saying, that we need to transform the traditional ethical theories. Now, the question is, how do we do that? And some of it we have already talked about, that we actually redefine the notion of rights, justice, dignity, self, etc., etc. But then basically we have to go into the depth of what exactly is happening and what are the issues which actually are questioned by feminists, because as we have said that most of the traditional moralists have been normative theorists have been talking about reason, having good reason to act. Why should you do something? Why do you act? Tell the truth. You ought to tell the truth. Why? Because you ought to tell the truth because it is. If you look at Kantian deontological theory, but you ought to tell the truth for the sake of truth only. All right. Now, this is the Kantian thing. So actually, you ought to tell the truth. This is a part of the categorical imperative, and since it's a categorical imperative, therefore it is based on reason. And if it is based on reason, then it's a kind of precondition for being human. All right, in Kantian sense. Therefore, there's no place for emotion, and therefore that's the reason that Kant is saying that women have no moral worth. Now, which shows that all these philosophers about whom I've talked about a little earlier, including from Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Mill, Rousseau, they are making a distinction, basic distinction between reason and emotion. This split between reason and emotion is one of the most familiar of philosophical conceptions. This has been associated with male endeavor and emotion with the female weakness. And of course, this is not the accidental association. So women are emotional and man is rational. And that's the reason that women are supposed to go to soft subject. They have to study soft subject like home science or humanities and social sciences, whereas male are supposed to be in science, technology, engineering, doctor, etc., etc. So maleness are aligned with activities determinate and defining femaleness with mere passive, indeterminate, and inferior matter. Feminists repeatedly show that the concept of human were built on what we think about women rather than what we think about men. It would be very different. So if human is redefined, including women, then the moral theory will be very different, and it would be very different concept of ethics. Thus, we have to search for universal or truly human guidance. Now, universal must include female as well, male and female both. Therefore, the human guidance, morality will give guidance to male and female both, and therefore will have no gender bias. So that's the ideal which they are looking for. Now, the other conceptual difference, which actually we find also in moral theories, is regarding the public and private. Women are supposed to be in the house. They have to look into the domestic affairs, and men are supposed to work They have to go for work and they have to bring money, so that they have to be in the public sphere. And self is, as we have said, that self is constructed. I mean, the gender is constructed. So female self is constructed, and female self is constructed through the male point of view. And mothering has been conceptualized as a primary biological activity, even when performed by humans, and virtually no moral theory in the history of ethics has been mothering as experienced by women. So mothering, which is one of the very important activity, has always been considered as biological, but it's not really only biological. And the way that has been experienced by women has not been philosophized, or which has been not captured by any moral theory. And seriously, I mean, this can actually give a lot of insights. The concept of mothering and the concept of mothering, which is an experience of women in the social context. This can be very important source of insight. And some of the women have really worked on this recently. Women have seen as emotional rather than rational being, and thus were not granted full moral personhood. All these are maintained. All these issues have been maintained by a lot of thinkers in recent past, and women's behavior was regarded as natural and driven by insight. Driven by instinct, because women naturally mother. I mean, they have the mothering capacity, and they are doing this, So it is a natural activity of mothering, and they are driven by the driven by the instinct. So because they are women, therefore they have biological kind of capacity, and therefore it is they have to mother. Right, so it's a kind of instinct. Being a woman means that instinctively they have to mother, and so was irrelevant to morality and moral principles. And therefore, mothering was really not considered as any morally important issue. But then it's also worth noting that Rousseau and Kant and Hegel, who have talked about women as inferior, they all actually have ignored the reality of women, as we have said, starting from Plato, Aristotle, and others. But then they paid homage to the emotional power and aesthetic sensitivity. So they are not granting them at moral personhood, but they are granting some kind of aesthetic sensibility and emotional power to them. Annette Bayer recently has published and speculated about why it is that moral philosophy has so seriously overlooked the trust. So we have talked about mothering. Now there's another notion of trust, for example. The women trust in her children, the women has trust in her husband, women has trust in her mother, father, etc. So the notion of trust is very important. And not only within the family relationship, but also in any kind of a social relationship, there is a kind of trust which actually works in everything, even in business. The notion of trust works, and among the human being, the notion of trust is very important. And this has been overlooked by most of the moral theories and moral in the moral life. So Annette Bayer actually talks about the notion of trust in moral life, and she noted that the great moral theorists in our tradition not only are men, they are mostly men who had minimal adult dealing with women. Now, this is very interesting and very important, that all these people about whom we have talked about, they are talking about sensibility, they are talking about emotions of the women, but they are not talking about the notion of, for example, trust. And because they did not have, of course, being a son or being the brother, they had some relationship with the women, but they had just minimal adult dealing with the women. Some of them were not even married, they never had any women friends and so on. So because of that, they really, perhaps that was the reason that they were really they were really so biased against women. Now, let me go a little deeper into this the dichotomies which we have talked about. We talked about the reason, the dichotomy between reason and emotion, which we find in especially in Kant focused, and then we also have another person like Carol Gilligan, who talks about the different voice we have talked about, that a different voice is needed, and which will reveal that women tend to preserve actual human relationship and care. So the ethics of care actually developed by Carol Gilligan, a psychologist, and she developed that the notion of care is extremely important for morality. So feminist ethics actually is sometimes also takes the form of care ethics, and initiated by Carol Gilligan, and a lot of work has been done recently. And so these are feminist philosophers are in the process of reevaluating the place of emotions in moral judgments. Many think that now care is of course a kind of emotion in that sense. Many think that morality requires the development of the moral emotions too. And as we have talked about the philosopher Annette Bayer, she talks about science, morality, and feminist theory in her book, where she develops the whole idea of feminist ethics. And then we have Virginia Held, who also develops feminist transformative moral theory. And she talks about that experience and practice out of which feminist theory, moral theory can be expected to be developed will include embodied feeling as well as thought. So thought and embodied feeling both have to be included in feminist ethics. The caring relationship essential to feminist morality cannot be conceived in terms of abstract doctrines. So caring relationship cannot be simply abstract doctrine, but it has to be caring relationship within the social setup, within the social realistic situation. And therefore, care, empathy, and feeling towards others may be better guide for our morality, which requires actual context. So therefore, the context are very important for feminist ethics. And very often, feminist ethics is criticized as relativistic or situational. But then it has to be relational and situational. The reason is that each feminist experience, each women's experience counts as a social reality. Now, the other category, which is also questioned, as we have said, is public and private, that women are supposed to work in the domestic field, caring, nurturing, etc., and male are supposed to look into the public affairs like politics, looking after the kind of outer world of the house. Now, Virginia Held describes man creates government and law and protects society by his willingness to risk death. In the household, it has been supposed that women merely reproduce life as mere natural and biological matter. And in this way, women are unavoidably excluded from the domain of public life. Now, by defining this sphere, the dichotomy creating which is created by the society and culture, the women are excluded from public life. And therefore, essentially, this becomes a kind of non-biological function. The function which involve biological organs to be excluded are not mere biological. Had it been so, then human activity would be biological. And if this kind of distinction is made and defined by the biological, then in that sense, human activity itself is biological. Any activity, whether it's done by male or female. So nursing and caring a baby is not biological act. Now, this is a very important statement which she's making, that nursing and caring a baby is not a biological act. Rather, it is cultural and human. So nurturing and caring is not biological, but it is a cultural and human act. A mother task is not confined to private realm, since it creates creative and morally capable individuals. Childhood, I mean, like mother is mothering the child, means that she's preparing a moral agent for the future. So therefore, it is a very creative act. It is not simply a private thing. So child care should be and must be at the center of social, political, economic, and moral thoughts. So child care is one of the most important moral activity of a women, and also should be of men. So, and economic and moral thoughts, and never be at the fringe. Thus, preconceptualization is necessitated to frame an ideal and probable model of human relationship and moral theory. So the human relationship, whether it is of caring or nurturing or any other kind of relationship, is extremely important from social point of view and also from moral point of view. Now, as we can see that the concept of self is also very important, because I mean, this embedded in the standard of moral theory. The self is constructed. So the self of a female is also constructed. The concept of self as an ego was actually the one which was emphasized by the rationalist and by the traditional normative theory. But the individualistic self now, which actually is is not simply the ego, but also the self which actually ties with the others in the social context between mother and the child, because it has been designed to maximize the satisfaction of an individual self. So our moral union with other members of the society cannot be analyzed into individual gains or loss. As we have said, that is not a contract, as Robert Nozick and John Rawls have tried to say that it's a kind of contract. It's not a contract. It is a kind of moral union with the other members of the society, and that cannot be analyzed into the gain or the loss. So self as a relation, self in a relation, not ego, is extremely important from a feminist point of view. Now, feminism has given a distinctive turn to our ethical thinking by showing that normativism needs a shake-up. Therefore, this kind of normative theories, like deontological theory and utilitarian theories and other virtue ethics, etc., they need a shake-up. That means that monolithic norms like teleology and deontology are taken to be sacrosanct and omnipotent in the ethical or value-related matters. This has to be stopped, and this has to be changed. That has to be transformed. Feminists are reconceptualizing the standard of traditional moral theory. Carol Gilligan, about whom we have talked about in her book In a Different Voice, she concentrates on care and personal relationship in their moral deliberations and not on the abstract or general rights and justice. They express their understanding of moral problems through knowing the context and situation in which a moral dilemma arises. So women actually, through their experience, they face the moral dilemmas, and in the context, in a situation, they take a decision either to act or to theorize. So women cannot score equally on the same moral development scale. And therefore, they need to go into the context, and they need to go into the situation. Therefore, the situation and context and relation becomes equally important in the social context, according to feminist theories. Another psychologist, Neil Nording, she talks about ethics of care and suggests that reshaping of non-feminist moral theory in her work, Caring Feminist Approach to Ethics and Moral Education, she develops the concept of justice central to ethics is being rediscussed and redefined by many feminists like Susan Morrill Okin in her eye-opening work, which is called Justice, Gender and Femininity, which is published in 1989, exposes that feminist platform the inconsistencies embedded in many contemporary views on justice. So within the concept of justice, I mean, like Rawls' theory of justice, injustice and justice actually they are contradictory. But I mean, like the feminist theories actually they allow the conflicts or inconsistencies within the concept of justice, and the theories of John Rawls and Robert Nozick, and also McIntyre, they are literally gender biased, and they are blind to the female gender. So these are actually some of the criticisms of the traditional ethical theories, and develop. I mean, like feminist ethics have taken different directions, and the different directions actually are giving some kind of outline of the feminist ethics, but there is no star kind of as we have said, that the feminist ethics based on care, based on trust, based on nurturance or mothering. Now, these are different forms of or different ways of transforming the traditional ethics, and I mean, there's no star feminist ethics, but then the domain of there's no then which one is the correct feminist ethics? Now, this kind of question cannot be asked here. The reason is that there is no domain of policing which will where people can speak for others. So to simply bring women into public and male domain of the police will leave. Now that if we are talking about equality exactly the same way, or rational equality and dignity or justification justice, just as the traditional moral theories and liberal theories have been talking about, then there will be some kind of policing which will leave no one to speak for the household. So we are not talking about the equality the way liberalists start talking about. So we are talking about equality with difference. So this is not equality, strict equality, but it is equality with difference. Now this will, if we are talking about equality, which is equality for equality's sake, then this will leave no one involved in the nurturance of children and cultivation of social reasoning relations. Now, if all women start working in the office, then who will look after the children? There will be nobody left for nurturing, and nobody will be able to cultivate the next generation. So the social relationship, which is the crux of the any ideal social setup, that also needs to be looked after. So therefore, it is not equality in the strict sense. Whatever men can do, women can do, surely. But at the same time, the opportunity should be there. But then whether they are doing it or not, so that has to be left to the women and also to the men to decide and to explore. So nurturance of and cultivation of social relationship can be of greatest moral import, and therefore the nurturing and cultivation of social relationships is very important, and that has to be looked after by any moral theory. Therefore, there are very good reasons for women not to want simply to be accorded entry as equals into the enterprise of morality as so far developed. So women, feminists may not want the equality in the sense of the strict equality. Women should certainly not agree as the price of admission to the masculine realm of traditional morality. Now, just because we are competing with the masculine morality does not mean that we want everything what the traditional morality had, to abandon our own moral concern as women. So this, I mean, the ideal is not to lose all the moral concern which traditional morality had, but just to transform in such a way so that women are also considered as human beings, and they are also included as a person within the morality. And the other, I mean, she is not an excluded other, but also included other. Although we do not have any feminist moral theory to offer as yet. So we have care ethics, we have different kind of feminist ethics we have talked about, ethics of care, ethics of mothering, and so on. But then we do not have any feminist moral theory as such. So in contrast to normative moral theories, we don't have any feminist moral theory as such to offer it here. And we can suggest some directions to develop such theory. They may not be such star feminist moral theories such as Rawls and Nozick as we have, but then we have feminists against presupposed star-centered male-dominated theory. So we experience it as a common labor, as a common task. So now this is exactly what we are trying to do, that to develop feminist ethics is a common kind of labor, and it's a common task for anybody who believes in feminism and who's working towards feminist ethics. Thank you so much. Thank you.